Uh, Good morning, sir. Uh, Ma'am, are you there? Shilpi, ma'am.
Yeah, Pranshul, speak.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, Pranshul.
Ma'am, I have a doubt. Could you please tell me the difference between basic price and factor cost?
Yeah,
Because,
sure. I'll tell you the
when
difference. Yeah,
yes, ma'am.
I'm
Okay.
getting it. It is. Any more doubts, Pranshul?
No, ma'am. That's it.
And do you know the difference between the factor cost and the market prices, Pranshul?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. I also received a doubt from Abhishek. Is Abhishek here? He hasn't joined yet. I also have to clear his doubt. So let's resume the class in a minute. Let everybody join till then. Amok sir, yesterday were we done completely with the labor and unemployment? Amok sir, are you here? I think he has left. Okay, let's just resume the class. So let's first address Pranshu's doubt. She has asked the difference between the factor cost, basic price, and market price. Firstly, let's start with the very basic that what is the difference between factor cost and market price? Because I think other students would be having a doubt in this. So, factor cost is usually the cost at which a particular good or service is produced. For example, if a good or product is being manufactured in a factory, whatever the costing is at the end of producing it in the factory, that is the factor cost. Now, if we add all the indirect taxes that are imposed by the government on that particular product, and at the same time, if we deduct all the subsidies that are being provided by the government for that particular product, we get the price at which that product is sold in the market, and that is known as market price. So, this is the relationship between the factor cost and market price. That is the first relation that you need to know. That if the product is manufactured in the factory, all the cost that has been incurred by the manufacturer at the end of producing that product is known as the factor cost of the product. After that, government imposes some indirect taxes on that product. You would be knowing GST as one of the indirect taxes. So that can be taken as an example. So we will add all the indirect taxes. We will deduct all the subsidies that are being provided by the government. For example, there are a lot of subsidies that are provided by the government, as we have seen in the production linked incentive scheme. You would have studied till now production linked production linked incentive scheme that is for 14 sectors where a lot of subsidies are provided by the government in order to promote those goods and services. So we will deduct all these subsidies and then we get what is known as market price. Now, similarly, there is one more thing that is known as basic prices, and that is where the question lies. So, whenever we get this factor cost and we just add the production taxes, and after that we just deduct the production subsidies, Then what we get is known as the basic prices, BP. I will tell you what production taxes and production subsidies are. First, write this formula that factor cost plus only the production taxes minus only the production subsidies gives us basic price. So we have come from factor cost to what is known as basic price. Now we also have to move from basic price to what is known as market price. Now, in order to calculate the market price from the basic price, the formula is basic price plus only the product taxes. ऊपर हमने क्या बोला प्रोडक्शन टैक्सेस here we are considering only the product taxes minus only the product subsidies in order to get market prices. So please write these two formulas, very very important. I think we would have missed it in the class. So firstly, we saw how to move from factor cost to the market price. Then we introduce a concept in middle of the factor cost and market price, that is the basic price. To move from factor cost to basic price, all the production taxes and the production subsidies are considered. And to move from basic price to market price, all the product taxes and the product subsidies are considered. Now the main question would be in your mind. I hope till here it is clear that what are actually the production taxes and what are actually the production subsidies. Now, production taxes and production subsidies are those taxes that are completely unrelated to how much quantity of a good is produced. They're completely unrelated to the volume of production. Unrelated to the volume of production. So they are paid by, for example, whoever is producing the good, uh, regardless of the quantity produced. So here we do not take into account how much quantity of a particular product is being produced. For example, we can take land revenue, we can take stamp duty. So here the producer has to pay the production tax in order to calculate the basic price regardless of whatever quantity he is producing. And इसके एग्जांपल हमने देख लिया जैसे जो लैंड रेवेन्यू देना पड़ता है, जो स्टैम्प ड्यूटी देनी पड़ती है, जो ऑपरेशनल सब्सिडीज मिलती है, इसमें क्वांटिटी को बिल्कुल अकाउंट नहीं किया जाता. रिगार्डलेस आप 40 क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हो या 4 लाख क्वांटिटी प्रोड्यूस कर रहे हो, आपको ये लैंड रेवेन्यू एक फिक्स अमाउंट पे देना पड़ता है. इसकी वैल्यू वेरी नहीं करते विद द क्वांटिटी. On the other hand, the product tax and subsidies are paid, are measured, are valued in terms of how many quantity of goods you are producing. So that is the major difference between the product taxes and the product subsidies. That the production taxes and the production subsidies have to be paid regardless of whatever volume of production you are doing. But the product taxes and subsidies are related to the volume of the production, are related to the value of the production. So they are levied per unit of product. जितनी क्वांटिटी आप प्रोड्यूस करोगे उतनी क्वांटिटी पे आपको प्रोडक्ट टैक्स या प्रोडक्ट सब्सिडी देना पड़ेगा. सो इट इज लेवाइड पर यूनिट. यानी कहाँ यूज होता है? बेसिक प्राइस से मार्केट प्राइस कैलकुलेट करने के लिए. प्रांशु, इज योर डाउट क्लियर नाउ?
Yes, ma'am. Ma'am, could you please show the formula for basic price?
Yeah, I'll just write it again. फैक्टर कॉस्ट से बेसिक प्राइस जाने के लिए यू जस्ट ऐड द प्रोडक्शन टैक्सेस minus the production subsidies. You get the basic price. And basic price से market price पे जाने के लिए you just add the product tax minus the product subsidy. And you get what is known as market price. और कभी आपको डायरेक्टली फैक्टर कॉस्ट से मार्केट प्राइस पे जाना है तो add all the indirect taxes minus all the indirect subsidies. And what you get is known as market price branch. These are the formulas. Any more doubts from this chapter, or can we move ahead to the new topic? So, since we are having no more doubts, we are going to start a new chapter that is known as money and banking. I would say it is by far the most important chapter given the number of questions that are asked from this particular chapter in prelims. Direct 3 to 4 questions out of 12 to 13 questions are from the area of money and banking. They're quite straightforward, quite easy. If you know the concepts, they can be answered easily. So that is the thing with money and banking. Now, I want to ask one question if you guys can unmute. What was the system that was followed by us before having what is known as money?
Barter system, ma'am.
Right, barter system. So, why did we shift from the barter system to money? Can you answer that?
Ma'am, because there was no proper value calculation in that. Like, uh,
Yeah,
like money is basically, stable. What should I say? Like there's something properly getting exchanged. So that is why, ma'am. There's
right.
something standardized. That's it.
Perfect. So he gave the right answer somehow that we moved from barter system to the money because it was very difficult to account for the value for each and every product in the barter system. Money gives us a standard value for every product. So in the barter system, if we have to write the keyword, a major problem was we required what is known as double coincidence of wants. Do remember this keyword? What is double coincidence of wants? In barter system, for example, if you want to sell something, in order to sell that something in, for example, if you are selling rice, in order to sell rice, and in return, if you want wheat, so you have to travel the entire market and you would have to search exactly that person who is going to take your rice and in return is going to sell you wheat. So it was very difficult to find that exact person. So that is known as double coincidence of wants. What is that in simple terms? जो आप बेचना चाहते हो उसको कोई खरीदने के लिए रेडी हो एंड इन रिटर्न आपको वो ही प्रोवाइड करे जो आपको चाहिए सो दैट इज द आइडिया ऑफ डबल कोइंसिडेंस ऑफ वांट्स दैट वाज नेसेसिटी a necessary condition in the barter system. Now, it was very difficult, it was very time consuming. So, ultimately, something called as money was invented. In simple terms, what is money? Money is something that is generally accepted as a medium of exchange. So, something that is generally accepted as a medium of exchange and it solved the problem of double coincidence of wants that we saw in the barter system. Now, if we come to the primary functions of money, what all functions are served by the money? The first function is as we saw medium of exchange. For any good or services, you make the payment in money. For every good and services, there is a price today that can be paid in money terms. For example, the pen for 10 rupees, Maggie for 12 or 13 rupees, whatever it is. So there is a value for each and every commodity or service that can be easily paid in money terms. The second thing is it is a unit of account. Or you can simply call it a measure of value. It is in fact a store of value. Whatever money you are getting today, you can simply store it and you can use it to pay on a later date. So it helps in storing the value of a product. It can be saved, it can be retrieved for later use. Also, it is a standard for deferred payment. Standard for deferred payment is in order to make all the future payments. For example, if you're taking any loan today and you need to make a payment tomorrow, so you can make it in terms of money. So it is a accepted way in order to settle all the future contracts, all the future debts, all the future loans. So there are four key functions of money. It's a medium of exchange, it's a unit of account, it is a store of value, and it is a standard for deferred payment. Now, there is also a concept of money supply. Money supply is nothing but the total stock of money that is held by the public. That is held by the public at any specific point of time. So money supply is nothing but the total stock of money that is held by the public at a specific point of time. Now, what is this money? What all this money is in case of money supply? In case of money supply, this money implies the currency that we hold plus the demand deposits that we have in bank. So money supply is nothing but the total stock of money in the form of either currency or the demand deposits that are held by the public at a specific point in time. Now, what I hope everybody would be knowing what currency is. In case you are having doubt regarding demand deposits, these are simply the deposits in the bank that can be withdrawn on demand. Whenever you would be demanding it, the bank has to provide you that particular amount of money that are known as demand deposits. So, in order to calculate the money supply, only two things are taken into account, the currency and the demand deposits. The time deposits are not taken into account. Can anybody tell me the difference between the demand deposits and time deposits? Hmm? Anyone?
Ma'am, demand deposits are your current account and savings account.
What is the difference between time deposit and the demand deposit? Why we call something as time deposit?
Ma'am, in demand deposits, one can withdraw money at any time. So,
Right.
whereas in time deposits, there is a fixed time, for example, in FDs and all. So, we need to
Great.
withdraw money after a specific time period.
Exactly. So a time deposit, as you have stated the example of fixed deposit, is simply the funds in a bank account which are deposited for a fixed period, for a predetermined period, and they cannot be withdrawn before that time period. So, as very well highlighted by her, that this is the difference between the demand deposits and time deposits. So, while calculating the money supply, we only take into account what is known as demand deposits. We do not take into account what is known as time deposit. Is that clear? Now let's move ahead and okay, let me tell you one thing, a very basic thing. Whenever we call macroeconomic policy, macroeconomic policy simply implies whatever we are planning for the nation at a larger level. We have earlier seen the difference between the microeconomics and the macroeconomics. So macro is anything at a higher level. So macroeconomic policy is the policy making at the national level. There we deal mainly with two policies. One is fiscal policy, one is monetary policy. Fiscal policy is anything that is related with the government expenditure, government revenue, anything associated with the taxes that is collected by the government, any scheme expenditure done by the government expenditure that we saw in the formula of C plus I plus G plus NX, and the various sources of revenue of the government. So fiscal policy is anything that is associated with the government of the day. But monetary policy is anything that deals with the money supply, and it is dealt by the central bank of a nation, and in our case it is the RBI. So whatever we are doing in today's class, for example, money supply, the functions of money, everything is a part of monetary policy, and it comes directly under the area or the functions of the Reserve Bank of India, which is the Central Bank of India. So do remember, the policy for a nation at a higher level is known as macroeconomic policy, divided into two key arenas, the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. The fiscal policy is anything that is dealt by the government of the day, and monetary policy is anything that is dealt by the central bank of the day. And so whatever we have discussed in today's class is dealt by RBI. However, the doubt that the Pranshu had, the doubt regarding the basic price, the market price, the factor cost, where we dealt with the production taxes and the product taxes, that is dealt within the fiscal policy of the day. That is dealt by the government. Now, if we talk about the Reserve Bank of India,
Ma'am,
yeah,
what does fiscal means? It was we have read fiscal deficit and all, but ma'am, उसका क्या मतलब होता है like?
yeah, we will be covering that. Fiscal deficit is the deficit that has been incurred by the government of the day. Fiscal deficit का ना simple meaning होता है borrowings. जो भी हमारी सरकार ने उधार लिए हैं, आपको ये पता होगा ना कि गवर्नमेंट कभी भी रेवेन्यू इतना कलेक्ट नहीं कर पाती है. Especially the Indian government is not able to collect enough revenue in order to carry out the expenditure of the year. So जो गवर्नमेंट है बहुत सारी बोरोइंग्स करती है, इंटरनल बोरोइंग्स करती है कंट्री से, एक्सटर्नल बोरोइंग्स करती है. जो टोटल बोरोइंग्स गवर्नमेंट करती है because of the revenue shortfall, that is known as fiscal deficit. Getting it, any borrowing done by the government of the day
Yes,
is
ma'am.
known as fiscal
Understood.
deficit. Clear? And
Yes,
this is
ma'am.
mainly because रेवेन्यू इतना नहीं कलेक्ट होता है. आपने ये पढ़ा होगा जो इंडियन इकोनॉमी में टैक्सेस पे करते हैं लोग, वो बहुत कम है. अर्न
Yes, ma'am.
सब कर रहे हैं बट टैक्सेस के ब्रैकेट में बहुत कम लोग आ रहे हैं और बहुत कम तो बहुत सारे लोग तो टैक्सेस को इवेड करते हैं. उस वजह से गवर्नमेंट इज ऑलवेज shortfall of the revenue, and this implies for all the developing nations. In all the developing nations we see this phenomena that the government is not able to collect enough taxes, and in order to build the infrastructure they have to carry out a lot of expenditure. So they mainly rely on the borrowings, and these borrowings somewhat reflect the health of the economy. कि इस particular government ने इतनी borrowings की है तो ये बताती है कि कितनी गवर्नमेंट की क्रेडिबिलिटी है. तो दैट इज व्हाई द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ फिस्कल डेफिसिट इज, एंड एनीवेयर इफ यू सी द टर्म फिस्कल आज से आपको डायरेक्टली समझ जाना है कि ये टर्म गवर्नमेंट से एसोसिएटेड है. इसमें जो सेंट्रल बैंक है उसका कोई हाथ नहीं है. ठीक है,
Understood, ma'am.
perfect. Now let's also see the topic of RBI again. If you would have analyzed the previous year questions, I would hope you would have analyzed. So around 3 direct questions from just the topic of RBI in the past 5 years. So that means you really have to do this topic well. अगर मैं RBI के बारे में बात करूं, अभी मैंने बताया था it is responsible for the monetary policy, and it's us to manage the money supply along with the interest rates, along with the inflation and other things. So mainly RBI has a goal to keep the inflation in control. What is inflation? महंगाई. So RBI का काम होता है कि प्राइसेस ज्यादा इंक्रीज नहीं होने देने मार्केट में, जो इन्फ्लेशन है उसको कंट्रोल में रखना है, बट उसके साथ ग्रोथ भी होने देनी है. So RBI has a simple goal of keeping the inflation in control by maintaining the money supply, by maintaining the interest rates, and ensuring that the growth is not obstructed in the economy. Then RBI obviously is known as India's central bank, and RBI was made under the RBI Act of 1934. In case, if you have done modern history by now, you would have read what is known as the Government of India Act of 1935. लक्ष्मीकांत का फर्स्ट चैप्टर है, उसमें गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया एक्ट 1935 के प्रोविजंस गिवन है. So in the very first chapter of the Lakshmikant, where the Government of India Act of 1935 is given, it mentions about the creation of RBI. So here we link the history and the economy. So RBI was actually created by the RBI Act of 1934, and the mention of the same is also seen in the Lakshmikant's chapter first. Then you should know RBI commenced its operation in actual terms from 1st April 1935. In the very initial days, RBI was a private bank, but ultimately it was nationalized in the year 1949. Nationalized means it was taken over by the government. It became an entity of the government. So earlier, Reserve Bank of India was a private bank, but in the year 1949, it was nationalized by the government. Now, RBI at the first place was created by the recommendation of Hilton Young Commission. Hilton Young Commission is also known as the Royal Commission on Indian Currency and Finance. You can write it. That the other name for the Hilton Young Commission is nothing but Royal Commission on Indian Currency and Finance. So, on the recommendation of this particular commission, RBI was created. Then you would be knowing that RBI is headed by a governor. There is a governor of RBI. This governor is appointed by the central government. And governor derives all its power from the RBI Act of 1934. Other than governor, there are also what is known as deputy governors. These deputy governors are also appointed by the central government. Now you need to know one thing, that Reserve Bank of India has 5 subsidiaries under it. That are 100% owned by the RBI. So RBI has around 5 subsidiaries under it, and they are 100% owned by the RBI. And one of the important one is, you would have seen in the newspaper, DICGC. You don't need to know the names of others. They're not relevant. Only name that you need to know is DICGC, because we will see its functions on a later date. So that is important. Other than that, one fact that you need to understand is, that was asked in the previous year question, that the central government of the day can actually issue directions to the Reserve Bank of India in public interest. Only after consulting the governor. But this thing, that the central government can give instructions to the Reserve Bank of India in public interest, and only after consulting the governor, is mentioned in the RBI Act and not in the Constitution of the day. This question was asked, that the Constitution mentions, the question was like that, given in the prelims, that the Constitution mentions that central government can give directions to the RBI in public interest after consulting the governor of the day. The statement was right, but it was not given in the Constitution. So the answer was a big no. It is given in the RBI Act. So if next time UPSC asks this question, that the RBI Act mentions that the central government can give directions to the Reserve Bank of India in public interest, then it would be correct. But the way in which it was asked, by mentioning the name of the Constitution, that was wrong. So these were the key arenas of RBI. Now you need to understand certain key functions of the RBI. The very first function of RBI is, it is the issuer of bank notes. All the notes that you see in the economy, other than the rupee 1 note, are issued by the Reserve Bank of India. So the only exemption is rupee 1 note, because rupee 1 note is actually issued by the Ministry of Finance. Other than rupee 1 note, all the bank notes that we see in the economy are issued by the Reserve Bank of India. Then RBI is also the banker to the government. Now, what is banker to the government? It implies that for both the central government and the various state governments that we have in the India, all the transactions of the government are taken care of by the Reserve Bank of India. So it is a banker to the government. It provides all the help to the government of the day related to all the banking transaction. It handles all their bank accounts. It handles all their credit and debit transactions. So it is the banker to both the central government and the state government. Other than this, it is also the lender of the last resort. Lender of the last resort means if there is any bank in the Indian economy that is facing a temporary crisis. So in that case, who is going to help that bank which is facing any temporary crisis in money terms? It is the RBI. So it lends to the bank, as a last resort, as a last measure, as a last provider. So Reserve Bank of India is the lender to all the banks as a last resort. And this applies, or this function of the RBI applies only for the banks, all the commercial banks that we have in the economy. It does not apply for any, I would say, trading institution or any corporate house. It is a lender of last resort only to the banks and not to the corporate houses. It is also the custodian of forex reserves. When we will be doing the chapter of balance of payment, we will understand the forex reserves. Forex means foreign exchange reserves, usually in the form of, gold, various currencies. We have that. We will understand this concept on a later date. But who is the custodian or who maintains this forex reserves? It is the Reserve Bank of India. So this forex reserves would be covered in the chapter of BOP, the balance of payment. But do remember the custodian of the forex reserves is Reserve Bank of India. Other than that, it is also the regulator of banks and certain NBFCs. Again, the concept of NBFC would be done, but for now, you should know that NBFCs are not actually banks. They are also involved in what is known as lending activities, and they are regulated by different institutions. For example, there are NBFCs in the line of insurance. They are dealt with another regulator. There are NBFCs in the field of assets. They are dealt by another regulator. But there are certain NBFCs that are dealt by the Reserve Bank of India. So, Reserve Bank of India not only regulates the banks of the day, but also certain NBFCs, and these NBFCs are non-banks that are also involved in lending functions. Other than that, RBI is also the custodian of cash reserves of commercial banks. This means all the commercial banks that we have in the nation have to maintain certain reserves in the form of cash with the Reserve Bank of India as a safety measure. They are often referred to as cash reserve ratio. So all the commercial banks have to maintain this cash reserves with the RBI as a safety measure, and that is why RBI is known as the custodian of the cash reserves of the commercial bank, and these cash reserves are known as cash reserve ratio, a certain portion of the money that the commercial banks receives. Only a portion of it, for example, 3 to 4%, has to be maintained with the Reserve Bank of India as a safety measure. It is a safety measure. So, RBI is the custodian of the cash reserve ratio. Other than this, we have seen even at international platforms, if we are having meetings regarding the monetary policy, the stability, the economic growth, we have seen often the governors from the RBI present us on that particular platform. सो वेरिड फंक्शंस है आरबीआई के, बट ये कुछ की फंक्शंस है, ये सारे याद रखने हैं. यू कांट फॉरगेट एनी ऑफ देम. लेंडर ऑफ द लास्ट रिसोर्ट डायरेक्टली प्रीलिम्स में पूछा गया है, ये पता होना चाहिए. बैंकर है दोनों सेंट्रल एंड स्टेट गवर्नमेंट को. बैंक नोट्स इशू करता है अदर देन द रुपी वन नोट. Then it is the regulator of banks of certain NBFCs. It is the custodian of the cash reserves. Forex reserves handle karta. So these are some basic functions of the RBI that needs to be known. Any doubt till now? Perfect.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
ma'am, does banks take loans from each other like?
Pardon, can you repeat again?
Ma'am, ma'am, does banks take loans from each other like let's
Yeah, there
say
are
normal
interbank
banks?
deposits. Yes, they do. You would have heard the term interbank deposits, interbank loans. We would be doing them separately. Interbank loans क्या होता है? बैंक्स एक दूसरे से लोन्स लेते हैं शॉर्ट टर्म के लिए, बहुत शॉर्ट टर्म के लिए, एक दिन, 2 दिन, 7 दिन. तो इनको हम इंटरबैंक डिपॉजिट्स कहते हैं, इंटरबैंक लोन्स कहते हैं. और इनको बोरो किया जाता है एक सेपरेट इंटरेस्ट रेट पे, जिसको हम कॉल रेट कहते हैं. तो yes, banks do borrow from each other. Do remember that.
Okay, ma'am.
Clear? Any more doubts?
No, no.
Perfect. So we did understand the concept of money supply. Now in money supply, you need to know that the money supply is also measured in 4 different ways in a given economy. You would have heard the concept of M1, M2, M3, M4. What are these M1, M2, M3, M4? These are different ways or different ways of accounting for whatever the money supply is in the economy. And this is measured by the Reserve Bank of India. Just know the formulas, you don't have to dive very deep in it. This topic is very rarely touched by UPSC, but at least know the formula. So M1 is often called the narrow money. And the formula for M1 is nothing but whatever the currency is with public plus whatever the demand deposits are with the public plus some other deposits with RBI. तो ये जो M1, M2, M3, M4 है, ये अलग अलग तरीके हैं, अलग अलग अकाउंटिंग के वेस हैं जो आरबीआई यूज करता है. क्यों यूज करता है? मनी सप्लाई को अलग अलग तरीके से मेजर करने के लिए. तो ये जो M1 तरीका है, सबसे इजिएस्ट वे है मनी सप्लाई को मेजर करने का. ये बताते हैं कितना लिक्विड मनी है इकोनॉमी में. लिक्विड मनी है, लिक्विड मनी मीन्स जब भी आपको उस पैसे की जरूरत है वो इमीडिएटली प्रोवाइड हो सकता है. लिक्विड सिंपली मीन्स द मिनट यू नीड इट, इट वुड बी प्रोवाइडेड टू यू. तो जो करेंसी है विद पब्लिक, वो तो मनी के ही फॉर्मेट में, डिमांड डिपॉजिट्स इजीली कन्वर्ट हो सकते हैं मनी में एट एनी गिवन डेट, बिकॉज आप जैसे ही वो बैंक से डिमांड करोगे आपको उसके लिए मनी मिल जाएगा. और जो भी अदर डिपॉजिट्स है विद आरबीआई, द मिनट द बैंक डिमांड देम, उनको मनी मिल जाता है. सो M1 को हम नैरो मनी बोलते हैं. ये सबसे लिक्विड फॉर्मेट होता है जिसमें द मिनट यू नीड इट आपके पास वो मनी के फॉर्म में होगा. सो M1 इज द way of measuring the money supply that is the most liquid, that takes into account the currency with the public, the demand deposits with the public and other deposits with RBI. अब जैसे ही हम M1 से M2 की टूवर्ड्स मूव करेंगे, M2 से M3 के टूवर्ड्स मूव करेंगे, एंड फ्रॉम M3 टू M4 लिक्विडिटी रिड्यूस होती रहेगी, लिक्विडिटी रिड्यूस होती रहेगी और चीजें ब्रॉड होती रहेंगी. तो M1 सबसे नैरो था बट सबसे ज्यादा लिक्विड था. बट जब तक हम M3 M4 में आएंगे ये सबसे ज्यादा ब्रॉड होंगे बट ये रिलेटिवली लेस लिक्विड होंगे. कि फॉर एग्जांपल इसके किसी भी कंपोनेंट को हम डिमांड करेंगे तो इजीली कैश में कन्वर्ट नहीं हो सकते, थोड़े हर्डल्स रहेंगे. सो ये डिफरेंट तरीके होते हैं मेजर करने के लिए मनी सप्लाई बाय द रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया. एंड M1 से M4 की मूवमेंट रिफ्लेक्ट करती है अ डिक्लाइन इन द लिक्विडिटी बट एन इंप्रूवमेंट इन द ब्रॉडनेस of the things covered. अगर यहीं पे हम बात करें M2 की, we talk about M2. M2 is nothing but M1 plus the saving deposits. With the post office, saving banks. I know this particular concept would be hard to learn for some of the students because there is very less logic in this concept of one M1, M2, M3, M4, and that is why this is hardly asked by UPSC. But these are simply the formulas that have been invented by the Reserve Bank of India in order to have an account of the various stock of monies that we have in the economy. So we have no option but to simply understand and learn them. So don't try to apply a lot of rational or logic here. Just know what are these things and just try to understand them, learn them, read them twice, thrice, and you would know the formulas. Now, if we talk about the M2, obviously it is going to be less liquid than M1, and it is simply derived from the M1. And just we add one more additional thing, that is whatever the saving deposits we have with the post office saving bank. Then we move towards what is known as M3. M3 is the format that is usually followed by RBI in order to calculate the money supply. M3 is known as the broad money. Again, M3 is nothing but M1 plus net time deposits with commercial banks. The only formula that I feel is very important to learn is M3 and M1. M3 is nothing but M1 plus the net time deposits with commercial bank. So you could understand from the formula itself that it is going to be less liquid as we have understood the concept of time deposits, the deposits that cannot be easily cashified on demand. So since here the term time deposit it is not liquid, it is less liquid. It cannot be cashified on demand. So obviously the liquidity is going to be less, but it is a more broader term. And this M3 is the most commonly used measure of money supply. Do remember this, most commonly used measure of money supply. Then there is also a formula for M4. If you remember it, well and good, the M4 formula, otherwise it's okay. M4 is nothing, M3 plus the total deposits with post office. Total deposits with the post office, and it is least liquid. Least liquid. The only thing that you need to actually remember is that it is the least liquid. If you remember the formula, well and good. If you don't, it is also fine. I don't think UPSC will dive in the formula of M4 ever. But the formula is M3 plus the total deposits with the post office. And only the key takeaway from this particular area is M3 is the broad money and it is the most important measure that is used for policy analysis in all the policies that revolve around the monetary arena. M3 is the most commonly used thing. I hope you would have written all the formulas by now. Now, when we talk about the monetary policy of the Reserve Bank of India, usually monetary policy focuses over two things, as I have explained you, to control the inflation, that is to fight the inflation, and the second thing is to ensure growth, that is to fight the deflation. In simple terms, inflation is the rise in the prices. So RBI has to ensure that the prices of the commodities or the prices in the economy do not rise in a in a very flowy format. That the prices rise in a very accommodative manner. They rise in a very controlled manner. They do not rise in an uncontrolled manner is the task that the RBI has to ensure. So to fight the inflation, That is one key function of RBI, and the other is to ensure growth. To ensure growth means to fight deflation. Deflation is the fall in the prices of the goods. At the same time, RBI has to also ensure कि चीजों के prices बहुत ज्यादा fall ना हो, चीजों के prices fall ना हो, क्योंकि what will happen if the prices of the commodities or the prices in the economy start declining? It somehow reflects that the economy is going down. It reflects that the growth is declining. It reflects that we are entering a phase of what is known as recession. If you regularly read the newspaper, you would have come across the term called as recession. वो भी नहीं होना चाहिए इकोनॉमी में. Recession is really bad for the economy. So RBI has to same time ensure that there is, not a decline in the prices, not a decline in the overall economy, in order to ensure that there is proper growth. We are not going into what is known as recession. Now, in order to, fight the inflation and in order to also control the deflation, there are various tools that are used by the RBI, known as quantitative tools and the qualitative tools. So this quantitative and the qualitative instruments or the tools that are used by the Reserve Bank of India altogether make the thing called as monetary policy of India. So this is a thing that you need to know, that the main two functions of the RBI is to fight inflation, but at the same time also to ensure growth. And in order to manage both of these functions, there are various quantitative and the qualitative tools that are used by the Reserve Bank of India, and together these are known as the tools or the instruments of the monetary policy. If we see tools, let's go into what is known as quantitative tools. These are the tools that are obviously going to affect the overall money supply of the economy. आरबीआई का मेन फंक्शन ये मनी सप्लाई को स्टेबल रखना. तो कोई भी टूल अगर आरबीआई यूज कर रहा है, उसका क्या पर्पस होएगा? उसका पर्पस होएगा कि वो मनी सप्लाई को स्टेबलाइज करे. तो जो भी टूल्स यूज हो रहे हैं वो अफेक्ट करेंगे ओवरऑल मनी सप्लाई को इन दी इकोनॉमी. सो सबसे पहला टूल जो आरबीआई यूज करता है उसको हम बोलते हैं रेपो रेट. रेपो रेट कुछ नहीं है. रेपो रेट वो रेट है जिसपे आरबीआई लेंड करता है मनी को कमर्शियल बैंक्स को. सो इट इज नथिंग, इट इज द रेट एट विच आरबीआई लेंड्स मनी टू कमर्शियल बैंक्स फॉर शॉर्ट टर्म. तो सबसे पहला टूल हमने देखा रेपो रेट. रेपो रेट कुछ नहीं है, आरबीआई जो रेट पे लोन्स देता है कमर्शियल बैंक्स को, उस रेट को हम रेपो रेट कहते हैं. तो हाँ बोलिए
मैम. तो रिवर्स रेपो रेट तो वो होएगा ना मैम, जो कमर्शियल बैंक्स जिस मतलब रेट पे आरबीआई को जो पैसा वापस करते हैं मैम, वो उसको बोलते हैं.
हाँ, मतलब जिस दो तरीके से बोल सकते हैं. जिस रेट पे आरबीआई बोरो कर रहा है कमर्शियल बैंक से, इसको उस फॉर्मेट में भी बोल सकते हैं या उस फॉर्मेट में भी बोल सकते हैं जिसमें आपने एक्सप्लेन करा है कि जिस रेट पे बैंक दे रहे हैं आरबीआई को. गेटिंग इट? तो जो भी आरबीआई बोरो कर रहे हैं उसको रिवर्स रेपो रेट कहेंगे. आरबीआई लेंड कर रहा है उसको रेपो रेट कहेंगे. गेटिंग इट? जब आरबीआई से
यस मैम
कमर्शियल बैंक के पास जा रहा है, मनी का फ्लो इस साइड है, उसको हम रेपो बोलते हैं. और मैं नेक्स्ट कॉन्सेप्ट पे आई रही थी, रिवर्स रेपो, जो आपने एक्सप्लेन कर दिया कि यहाँ पे आरबीआई बोरो कर रहे हैं एक तरीके से, या हम बोल सकते हैं कमर्शियल बैंक्स लेंड कर रहे हैं, इसको ये भी बोल सकते हैं. दोनों तरीके हैं बोलने के. ठीक है?
ओके मैम.
Yeah, but before diving into the concept of reverse repo rate, I need to explain one thing. अभी हमने देखा है कि रेपो रेट क्या होता है, जिस रेट पे आरबीआई सिंपली प्रोवाइडिंग दी लोन्स और लेंड कर रहा है कमर्शियल बैंक्स को. बट ये कैसे हमारी मनी सप्लाई को रेगुलेट करेगा? आई नीड टू एक्सप्लेन दिस. फॉर एग्जाम्पल लेट्स थिंक एक इकोनॉमी में बहुत ज्यादा मनी है, बहुत ज्यादा मनी सप्लाई है, लोगों के हाथ में बहुत ज्यादा पैसा है। अब लोगों के हाथ में बहुत ज्यादा पैसा है तो क्या हो रहा है, प्राइजेस राइज हो रहे हैं। लेट्स टेक एग्जांपल कि एक इकोनॉमी है, इकोनॉमी इंडिया ही ले लेते हैं, और इंडिया में सारे लोगों के पास बहुत ज्यादा पैसा है, मनी सप्लाई बहुत हाई चल रही है। अब क्या हो रहा है इससे, money supply in the economy is very high, implies that almost all the people are having good amount of money. तो अगर प्रोडक्शन हो रहा है, एग्जाम्पल एप्पल का, और एप्पल का प्रोडक्शन है ₹50 पे, वो मार्केट में आ रहा है फॉर अ केजी। अब जो एप्पल मार्केट में आ रहा है, जो उसकी सप्लाई है एप्पल की, वो तो लिमिटेड है, बट जो लोग हैं जो डिमांड कर रहे हैं वो बहुत सारे और सबके पास मनी है। तो इवेंचुअली क्या होएगा, क्योंकि सप्लाई एप्पल्स की इतनी नहीं है, कोई बोलेगा कि मैं आपको 60 दे देता हूं, आप मुझे दे दो। कोई दूसरा इंसान बोलेगा सेलर को कि आप मैं 70 दे रहा हूं, आप मुझे दे दो। कोई बोलेगा मैं 80 दे रहा हूं बट आप सारे एप्पल मुझे दे दो। तो इससे क्या होएगा, हमारे प्राइसेस एप्पल के इकोनॉमी में बढ़ने लग जाएंगे। द प्राइसेस ऑफ द एप्पल विल इंक्रीज इन द इकोनॉमी। व्हाई? बिकॉज द सप्लाई ऑफ द एप्पल इज लिमिटेड, but the demand of apple is too high because everyone is having decent money in their hands in the economy due to high money supply, right? So ultimately क्या हो रहा है, एप्पल का प्राइस बढ़ रहा है, प्राइस ऑफ एप्पल इज इंक्रीजिंग। तो ये क्या रिफ्लेक्ट कर रहा है, क्योंकि जो सप्लाई थी कमोडिटी की लिमिटेड थी, क्योंकि मार्केट में बहुत ज्यादा मनी सप्लाई थी, तो प्राइजेस कमोडिटी के इंक्रीज हो गए। और इसी चीज को अगर हम जनरल लेवल पे देखें कि अगर सारे के सारे कमोडिटीज के प्राइसेस राइज हो रहे हैं, नॉट जस्ट एप्पल, फॉर एवरीथिंग, फॉर कार, द हाउसेस, द फ्रूट्स, द वेजिटेबल्स, द क्लोथ्स एंड एवरीथिंग, सबके प्राइसेस राइज हो रहे हैं अगर एक इकोनॉमी में, उसी चीज को हम इन्फ्लेशन कहते हैं। तो क्योंकि एक इकोनॉमी में अगर बहुत ज्यादा मनी सप्लाई होएगा तो अल्टीमेटली इट विल लीड टू व्हाट इज नोन एज द फिनोमेना ऑफ इन्फ्लेशन, because everybody is having the money in order to buy the commodities, so there is going to be a competition between the customers and eventually they are going to bid higher and higher prices and the prices in the market will rise. अब ये कंसर्न हो जाता है रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया के लिए कि अरे प्राइसेस तो बहुत ज्यादा इंक्रीज हो रहे हैं, इससे तो इकोनॉमी अनस्टेबल हो जाएगी। तब आरबीआई यूज करता है रेपो रेट को एज अ टूल। अब रेपो रेट कैसे यूज होएगा, रेपो रेट अभी हमने देखा वो कुछ नहीं है जिस रेट पे रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया लेंड कर रहा है मनी टू दी कमर्शियल बैंक्स। एंड आपको पता होगा कमर्शियल बैंक्स इस मनी को अल्टीमेटली किसको लेंड करते हैं, कस्टमर्स को, हमें, यू, मी, रिटेलर्स, राइट। तो अगर आरबीआई ये लेंडिंग रेट इंक्रीज कर देता है, आरबीआई रेपो रेट इंक्रीज कर देता है, फॉर एग्जांपल रेपो रेट था 4% मान लो, एंड आरबीआई सडनली रेपो रेट को इंक्रीज कर देता है तो 4.5%, तो अब कमर्शियल बैंक्स के लिए पैसा बोरो करना महंगा हो गया। इट इज कॉस्टली फॉर द कमर्शियल बैंक्स टू बोरो फ्रॉम आरबीआई। तो कमर्शियल बैंक्स क्या करेंगे, दे विल बोरो लेस, दे विल बोरो लेस। द मिनट कमर्शियल बैंक्स विल बोरो लेस, उनके पास आगे लेंड करने के लिए भी कम अमाउंट हो जाएगा, राइट। दे विल हैव लेस टू लेंड टू द कस्टमर्स, एंड लेस होएगा टू लेंड तो क्या होएगा, ये जितना भी लेंड करेंगे वो हायर इंटरेस्ट रेट पे लेंड करेंगे, इंटरेस्ट रेट राइज करेगा तो पीपल बोरो कम करेंगे, पीपल विल बोरो लेस। तो इससे क्या होएगा, द मिनट पीपल विल बोरो लेस मनी, द मनी सप्लाई इन द इकोनॉमी विल रिड्यूस, एंड हम इन्फ्लेशन के प्रॉब्लम को थोड़ा बहुत सॉल्व कर लेंगे। आई एम गोइंग टू एक्सप्लेन यू अगेन दिस पर्टिकुलर थिंग, क्योंकि इंपॉर्टेंट है। जो रेपो रेट है वो क्या है, सिंपली द रेट जिस पे आरबीआई लेंड करता है मनी टू द कमर्शियल बैंक, या कमर्शियल बैंक जिस रेट पे बोरो कर रहे हैं फ्रॉम रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया। क्योंकि इकोनॉमी में इतना हाई इन्फ्लेशन था, आरबीआई ने डिसाइड करा कि हम रेपो रेट को इंक्रीज करते हैं फ्रॉम 4 to 4.5%। जैसे ही 4 to 4.5% कर दिया रेपो रेट, तो कमर्शियल बैंक के लिए बोरो करना कॉस्टली हो गया था। सेम अमाउंट ऑफ मनी जो वो पहले बोरो कर रहे थे 4% इंटरेस्ट पे, अब वो उन्हें बोरो करना पड़ेगा 4.5 पे। तो कमर्शियल बैंक डिसीजन लेते हैं कि हम इस टाइम पीरियड के लिए लेस बोरो करेंगे। अगर वो लेस बोरो करेंगे तो वो आगे जो कस्टमर्स हैं उन्हें लेस लेंड कर पाएंगे, और क्योंकि उनके पास बहुत लेस अमाउंट है लेंड करने के लिए, वो ट्राई करेंगे कि उस पर ज्यादा इंटरेस्ट अर्न कर सके, वो भी अपना इंटरेस्ट रेट बढ़ा लेंगे. तो एज अ रिजल्ट कस्टमर्स विल बोरो लेस बिकॉज इंटरेस्ट रेट अभी इकोनॉमी में बहुत हाई चल रहा है. तो as a result, just by simply increasing the repo rate, the RBI was able to target the inflation in the economy by controlling the overall money supply. By controlling the overall money supply. Similarly, अगर RBI को कभी डिफ्लेशन को टारगेट करना है, या आरबीआई चाहते ग्रोथ हो इकोनॉमी में, ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोगों के पास मनी सप्लाई हो, तो आरबीआई ऑपोजिट कर लेगा, रेपो रेट को रिड्यूस कर देगा. जस्ट ऑपोजिट पॉलिसी. द मिनट आरबीआई रिड्यूसेस रेपो रेट, कमर्शियल बैंक्स बहुत ज्यादा बोरो करेंगे क्योंकि सस्ते में लोन मिल रहा है. कमर्शियल बैंक्स विल बोरो मोर. द मिनट कमर्शियल बैंक्स विल बोरो मोर, अब उनके पास इतना ज्यादा पैसा है, दे विल लेंड मोर, and they will lend more at a lesser interest rate. The minute they will lend more at a lesser interest rate, the money supply in the economy will increase. The minute money supply will increase, we will see a boost to what is known as growth. क्योंकि अब जब लोगों के हाथ में पैसा होएगा, वो goods and services डिमांड करेंगे, कहीं ना कहीं ये ग्रोथ को बूस्ट करेगा. So this is how the instrument of repo rate is used by the Reserve Bank of India in order to control the overall inflation and overall deflation in the economy. Is this clear to everyone?
Yes,
Is this
Yes,
idea
ma'am.
perfect? If this is clear.
But
वैसे ही
I
एक
need
और
to revise
yeah,
this once or twice. Like
right now, or you need to revise at your
yes,
own
ma'am.
level.
Just I will revise at my own level, ma'am. No issues.
Perfect.
Ma'am,
Similarly, there is, yeah, please ask.
ma'am, the borrowings taken by the RBI from the commercial banks, ma'am, when
Hmm?
does it happen? Because RBI already have the like reserves from the banks.
Right.
So
I'll tell you. That is known as reverse repo rate. Okay. It is done by the RBI. RBI borrows this money not because RBI needs money. Let me tell you, RBI already has a lot of money in hand. It has a lot of reserves in hand. It has money from various instruments. It also has forex in hand. It also has the cash reserves of the bank. It also has the money from the government. So RBI is never shortfall of, RBI never faces that issue where it needs to borrow. But this reverse repo rate is an instrument that has been actually created in order to control the money supply. So we often say that RBI borrows, but in actual terms, it is not because RBI needs money. This is done only because RBI wants to control money supply. It is just an instrument, as simple as that. एक टूल है, एक इंस्ट्रूमेंट है जो आरबीआई इशू करता है मनी सप्लाई को कंट्रोल करने के लिए इकोनॉमी में. ये इसलिए नहीं यूज हो रहा क्योंकि आरबीआई को एक्चुअल नीड है मनी की. गेटिंग इट?
So, ma'am, is it an obligation for the banks?
Yes, anything that the RBI says would be an obligation of for the banks, but ये reverse repo or repo rate is not an obligation. मतलब banks have to do it when they feel like doing it. Commercial banks ये necessity नहीं है, but रेट्स जो है रेपो रेट के, रिवर्स रेपो रेट के, वो आरबीआई फिक्स करेगा कि इंटरेस्ट रेट इतना ही होगा. बट उस पर्टिकुलर रेट पे अगर कमर्शियल बैंक को बोरो करना है या लेंड करना है, दैट इज कंप्लीटली अ वॉलंटरी डिसीजन ऑफ द बैंक. इज दैट क्लियर? Is that clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So RBI कभी भी, yeah.
Ma'am, the interest rate for the reverse repo also decided by RBI only, ma'am?
Yes, RBI, the central bank. It decides almost all the interest rates.
Okay.
So the repo rate and the reverse repo rate is decided by the Reserve Bank of India. If any commercial bank wants to borrow at repo rate or reverse repo rate, has to borrow at these particular interest rates only, but it is not compulsory for the commercial banks to borrow or lend to the Reserve Bank of India when it is not required. It is a voluntary decision of the banks. So let's once also see what is reverse repo rate in actual terms. Reverse repo rate is nothing, but it is the rate at which RBI borrows money from the commercial bank just to absorb liquidity. See, it is not for borrowing purposes, it is in order to absorb the liquidity that we have in the economy. जो excess money supply है economy में उसको observe करने के लिए RBI इस tool को use करता है. So ये याद रखना, ये keyword हो जाएगा कि in order to absorb the liquidity in the market, RBI uses the tool of reverse repo rate. तो यहाँ क्या हो रहा है, यहाँ पे हमारा RBI है, यहाँ हमारा कमर्शियल बैंक है, और यहाँ पे फ्लो ऑफ मनी ऐसे होएगा. You can say RBI borrows money, and in return RBI pays what is known as reverse repo rate to the commercial banks. One fact that you need to remember is reverse repo rate is generally lesser than the repo rate, always. अभी तक जितने भी साल हुए हैं कभी हमने देखा नहीं कि reverse repo rate was higher than the repo rate. So as a general phenomena, but always observed in the Indian economies, reverse repo rate is always lesser than the repo rate. For example, अगर repo rate हमारा 4% चल रहा है, तो reverse repo rate usually 3.25% होता है. So this is a normal general tendency of the reverse repo rate. ये reverse repo rate का I hope concept clear हो गया. Again, it is a tool that is used by the RBI in order to control the money supply in the economy, to absorb the excess liquidity that we are having in the economy. So this was the second tool. The third tool is cash reserve ratio, जो हमने starting में देखा था. मैंने कहा था कि जो RBI है custodian है cash reserves का, तो क्या है ये cash reserve ratio? Cash reserve ratio is nothing but एक percentage of whatever the bank is receiving in the form of deposits from the customer. For example, जो हम जैसे customer से बहुत सारे deposits करते हैं कमर्शियल बैंक के साथ, तो अगर फॉर एग्जाम्पल 1000 रुपीज के डिपॉजिट्स कमर्शियल बैंक रिसीव कर रहे हैं, उसका सिर्फ एक परसेंटेज कैन बी 4%. इसका एक पर्टिकुलर अमाउंट ऑफ परसेंटेज बैंक को डिपॉजिट करना पड़ेगा विद द रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया इन द फॉर्म ऑफ कैश. So cash reserve ratio, also known as CRR, is nothing but simply a percentage of the bank deposits kept as cash with the RBI. So जितना भी deposits एक बैंक commercial बैंक receive करता है, it can be 1000, 10,000, 10 lakh, anything, उसका एक fixed percentage, that is 4%, उसको Reserve Bank of India के पास रखना पड़ेगा in the cash form. उसको हम कैश रिजर्व रेशियो कहते हैं, और ये ना एक सेफ्टी की तरह भी एक्ट करता है, जो कमर्शियल बैंक्स को प्रोटेक्ट करता है इन केस वो कोई भी लिक्विडिटी क्राइसिस कभी भी फ्यूचर में फेस करती है, तो इट एक्ट्स एज अ सेफ गार्ड. एंड ये हर एक बैंक को मेंटेन करना पड़ता है. तो CRR इज कंपल्सरी. देयर वाज अ क्वेश्चन कि क्या ये चीजें कंपल्सरी होती है, तो रेपो रेट एंड रिवर्स रेपो रेट पे बोरो या लेंड करना जरूरी नहीं था, बैंक्स को नीड के अकॉर्डिंग करना था, बट कैश रिजर्व रेशियो सारे के सारे बैंक्स के लिए कंपल्सरी है, सबको मेंटेन करना पड़ेगा विद द रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया विदाउट एनी शॉर्टफॉल. ये मैंडेटरी होता है. वैसे ही एक और चीज होती है स्टैट्यूटरी लिक्विडिटी रेशियो. स्टैट्यूटरी liquidity ratio. अब ये क्या है, ये अगेन एक परसेंटेज है ऑफ बैंक डिपॉजिट्स that is kept in the form of liquid assets. For example, gold. For example, government securities, by the bank itself. अब यहाँ पे 3-4 कीवर्ड्स पे फोकस करना है ताकि आपको डिफरेंस समझ आए. ये भी परसेंटेज ही है बैंक डिपॉजिट्स का, जो कैश के फॉर्म में नहीं रखने की जरूरत, आप किसी भी लिक्विड एसेट के फॉर्म में रख सकते हो. लिक्विड एसेट में कैश तो आता ही है, उसके अलावा आप चाहो तो गोल्ड में रख सकते हो, गवर्नमेंट की सिक्योरिटीज में रख सकते हो. वी विल बी डूइंग गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज आल्सो व्हेन वी वुड बी डूइंग बॉन्ड्स एक्सेट्रा. तो गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज के फॉर्म में भी रख सकते हो, और ये बैंक को अपने पास ही मेंटेन करना होता है, आरबीआई के पास नहीं मेंटेन करना होता. तो इटसेल्फ सो अगर हम डिफरेंस देखें कैश रिजर्व रेशियो का और स्टैट्यूटरी लिक्विडिटी रेशियो का, कैश रिजर्व रेशियो भी क्या है, परसेंटेज ऑफ बैंक डिपॉजिट्स है, एसएलआर भी परसेंटेज ऑफ बैंक डिपॉजिट्स है, बट कैश रिजर्व रेशियो बैंक को सिर्फ कैश के फॉर्म में ही रखना पड़ता है, वो भी आरबीआई के पास, बट स्टैट्यूटरी लिक्विडिटी रेशियो बैंक किसी भी लिक्विड एसेट के फॉर्म में रख सकता है, वो कैश हो सकता है, वो गोल्ड हो सकता है, वो गवर्नमेंट सिक्योरिटीज हो सकती है, और ये खुद के पास रखना है, ये आरबीआई के पास डिपॉजिट कराने की जरूरत नहीं है। एंड ये याद रखना है, एसएलआर ना इंडियन इकोनॉमी के लिए यूजुअली 18% के आसपास होता है, आपको 18% मेंटेन करना पड़ता है, और जो कैश रिजर्व रेशियो होता है वो यूजुअली 4% के आसपास होता है, तो बहुत ज्यादा गैप है। स्टैट्यूटरी लिक्विडिटी रेशियो जो आपको खुद के पास मेंटेन करना होता है वो अच्छा खासा परसेंटेज है, 18 से 19% की रेंज में होता है, और जो आपको रिजर्व बैंक के पास रखना है वो बहुत स्मॉल अमाउंट होता है, 4%, दैट नीड्स टू बी नोन। अगेन एसएलआर and CRR both are compulsory. Every bank has to do it, no matter what. So it is compulsory for banks. Maintaining SLR also and maintaining CRR also. Again, ये SLR and CRR कुछ नहीं है, ये safety measures हैं कि कोई भी crisis आए तो एटलीस्ट बैंक के पास खुद के कुछ assets होने चाहिए जो वो यूज कर सकता है in order to resolve any temporary crisis. Similarly, cash reserve ratio का भी वही यूज है। तो CRR and SLR are actually a protection to a bank from the temporary crisis that if it ever faces in the future. So अभी हमने 4 quantitative tools करे हैं, SLR, CRR, then we have done repo rate and reverse repo rate. There are few other tools, but we will continue it from tomorrow. Most probably, I guess tomorrow money and banking would be completed. Because I'm trying to cover each and every topic. I don't want कि कुछ भी रह जाए, बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है, प्रीलिम्स में डायरेक्ट 3 से 4 क्वेश्चंस आ जाते हैं, तो आई एम ट्राइंग टू कवर जितना वाइड ब्रॉड में कवर कर सकती हूँ। बस आपको एक चीज करनी है, आप जो भी पढ़ा है क्लास के बाद इंस्टेंटली रिवाइज कर लेना, क्योंकि ये टॉपिक्स थोड़े डिफिकल्ट हैं, आप पहली बार पढ़ते हो ये चीजें, ये जनरली वी आर नॉट अवेयर ऑफ दीज आइटम्स, स्पेशली द फंक्शनिंग ऑफ द बैंक्स। सो द मिनट मैं क्लास को एंड करूंगी, आई वांट यू टू रिवाइज ये बेसिक नोट्स एंड देन वंस गो थ्रू द चैप्टर ऑफ मनी एंड बैंकिंग इन द एनसीईआरटी फॉर द टॉपिक्स दैट वी हैव कवर्ड। जो टॉपिक्स नहीं कवर हुए हैं उनको इग्नोर कर देना, वो हम कल क्लास में कवर कर लेंगे, बट जस्ट गो थ्रू द एनसीईआरटी इन ऑर्डर टू सी कि अच्छा क्या क्या चीजें होती हैं, अगर कुछ मिस हो गया तो वो फैक्ट भी आपका कवर हो जाएगा। सो दैट इज व्हाट आई एम कवरिंग फॉर टुडेज क्लास। कोई भी डाउट है फील फ्री टू आस्क राइट नाउ।
Ma'am, both of these things, CRR and SLR, both are compulsory, right?
Yes, both are compulsory.
So, ma'am, how can RBI keep a check on SLR?
There is a proper mechanism. It doesn't function as we see. Proper inbuilt mechanism होते हैं, in-house mechanism होते हैं, proper checkings होती है, and अगर कुछ भी मतलब गलत तो नहीं कहूंगी, कुछ भी शॉर्टफॉल फाइंड किया जाता है तो डायरेक्ट वार्निंग आती है रिजर्व बैंक ऑफ इंडिया से कमर्शियल बैंक के पास, एंड यूजुअली बहुत स्टैंडर्ड क्लियर प्रोसीजर गाइडलाइन लेड डाउन होती है, तो यू डोंट हैव टू वरी अबाउट इट, एवरीथिंग इज प्रॉपर्ली फॉलोड, स्पेशली इन द बैंक्स ऑफ इंडिया, रेगुलेशन बहुत ज्यादा स्ट्रांग है।
Okay, ma'am, got it.
Yeah. Any more doubts, anyone? So I think we are done for the today's class. And Abhishek, was your doubt resolved?
Ma'am, like today's class or ma'am the thing I asked?
No, the previous doubt that you asked me. कल clear किया था वो
chat वाले में मैम जो पूछा था मैं। नहीं मैम वो तो नहीं कहीं नहीं पूछा।
चलो मैं एक्सप्लेन कर देती हूँ। आई वांटेड टू एक्सप्लेन यू दैट। आपने कहा था इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी कैसे काउंट होती है जीडीपी में, राइट? बिकॉज इंडियन इकोनॉमी इज मोस्टली इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी, 80 to 90% इंडियन इकोनॉमी इज इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी, राइट? तो गवर्नमेंट क्या करती है, गवर्नमेंट बहुत सारे अकाउंटिंग टूल्स यूज करती है इन ऑर्डर टू गेट एन अप्रोक्सीमेट वैल्यू ऑफ द इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी। देखो एब्सोल्यूट वैल्यू तो इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी की मेजर करना इम्पॉसिबल है, क्योंकि बहुत सारी एक्टिविटीज कभी अकाउंट ही नहीं होती, बट गवर्नमेंट अपनी तरफ से बेस्ट ट्राई करती है कि अप्रोक्सीमेट वैल्यूज लेके सब कुछ अकाउंट कर ले, एंड उस अकाउंटेड वैल्यू को यूज किया जाता है जीडीपी की कैलकुलेशन में। Okay, Abhishek. So that is based on approximate values that is accounted by the government on the basis of its research and development कि अच्छा informal economy का इतना size होना चाहिए and उसके basis पे सब कुछ होता है. Is that fine, Abhishek?
Yes, ma'am. So, ma'am, like अभी आप पढ़ा रहे थे कि लाइक टैक्सेस का कि गवर्नमेंट मोस्टली बोरोइंग्स में डील करती है, लाइक टैक्सेस नहीं रिसीव करती गवर्नमेंट ज्यादा. तो मैम बिकॉज ऑफ दिस ओनली ना कि इनफॉर्मल इकोनॉमी है, तो मैम लोगों का कितना क्या है तो उसको वो नहीं होता, तो इस वजह
इनफॉर्मल
से.
इकोनॉमी तो हार्डली अकाउंट होता है. दे नेवर पे टैक्सेस. इनफॉर्मल का यही तो मतलब है, दे आर नॉट इवन रजिस्टर्ड
जी
ढंग
जी
से, राइट? तो
जी जी.
मेनली जो गवर्नमेंट को रेवेन्यू आ रहा है टैक्स फॉर्म में वो फॉर्मल इकोनॉमी से ही है. एंड क्योंकि फॉर्मल इकोनॉमी इतनी कम है, इट इज हार्डली 10 to 15% इन द केस ऑफ इंडिया, तो गवर्नमेंट इज नॉट एवर अर्निंग इनफ रेवेन्यूज, इट इज नॉट एवर अर्निंग इनफ टैक्सेस, एंड दैट इज व्हाई इट हैज टू बोरो अ लॉट ऑफ अमाउंट फ्रॉम within India, that is internal borrowing, and from outside India, and that is why हमारी fiscal deficit बहुत high भी रहती है.
अंडरस्टूड मैम.
Perfect. So we will be ending today's class and we will be continuing from tomorrow. All the very best, everyone, and start studying.
थैंक यू मैम. थैंक यू.